Hi, everybody. Thank you for joining us here today. One of the things that we find really important here at Catch is the tenet of education. We educate ourselves really regularly on best practices, how best to address homelessness. We research other communities to see who's doing it right, who's doing it well, where we can improve our system as a whole. And we find it really important to educate our community, because with an educated community, we increase the possibility that we will end homelessness here in the Treasure Valley. My name is Sara, and I work at Catch. I am a program director here for the Our Path Home Connect program. Catch adopted this program in 2017, and we do a lot of work in the larger system of homelessness. And what I wanted to do today is educate everyone on homelessness, the homeless services system, so that everyone knows what types of resources are available for folks that we serve who are experiencing a housing crisis of any kind. So what I'm going to start off with is what we call ourselves. So we're a bunch of organizations. There are almost 40 organizations that are partnered together in what we call the Continuum of Care. I'm going to abbreviate that here, COC. The lead for our Continuum of Care is the city of Boise, and the Continuum of Care does a couple of things. So first, it is kind of a funnel through which money flows from the federal government to the local community. So the federal government recognizes that they don't know, what each community needs to do to address homelessness and housing insecurity within its own community, so they task that to the Continuum of Care. Secondly, what the Continuum of Care does is we do a lot of partner work to make sure that all of our partners are robust in serving our clients as best as possible, because when someone is experiencing homelessness, they are going through so much. They are experiencing active trauma in that moment. They're in crisis, and most of the time there is a lot of trauma that has led up to homelessness. So it's important to not only have housing partners, it's also important to have these ancillary partners such as mental health services, recovery services, job employment services, shelters, all kinds of different organizations come together to help our clients in need. What I'm going to be discussing with you today is specifically just the homeless services, or housing insecurity and homeless services. With the Continuum of Care, they are working on any stage of homelessness and housing insecurity. So that might look like working like a rental payment. So someone who is housed and they're unable to pay their rent that month, so we can get them some assistance to stay in their home. And that goes all the way to homelessness, people living in their cars, camping in shelters, and into housing programs that serve that specific population. So what I'm going to start with today is I am going to start on this end of the board with prevention. So prevention, one thing I did forget to mention. So please place any comments or questions that you have in the chat, and we will address them at the end of the presentation. So first, we have prevention. Prevention is that service where maybe you are housed and you need a rental payment. Maybe you got sick, and couldn't work for a couple of weeks, and that really kept you from being able to pay your rent that month. A lot of people obviously have been affected by COVID, reduced hours, things like that. So we're going to talk about those resources right now. So the Continuum of Care's lead prevention provider is Jesse Tree. Many of you have probably heard of Jesse Tree. Jesse Tree, for the most part, assists folks who are going through that legal eviction process. So that means someone has received a 3-day pay or quit, pay your rent in 3 days, or we're going to go through those legal processes, or they actually have a court date and a summons to go to court for an eviction hearing. So that is really Jesse Tree's specialty. They help other folks too as needed, but that's really going to be their primary population that they serve. Secondly, we have navigation. Many people might be aware of this program because it does so much more than provide prevention services. Basically, what they do is work with anyone who has children under the age of 18 in the household, and really focuses on the safety of that child. So anything having to do with the safety of that child, navigation is really prepared to help with. Navigation is run by the Department of Health and Welfare. So that would be who would need to be contacted in order to access navigation services. Third, we have a temporary program, and we call it Emergency Rental Assistance Program, ERAP. And ERAP is managed currently by the Boise City, Ada County Housing Authorities. So the reason I say ERAP is temporary is because this is COVID funding. So anyone who is experiencing housing insecurity or instability as a result of COVID and needs a rental payment is able to access these ERAP funds and get assistance. So we've got people like with long haul COVID who just can't even work right now. Those are the types of situations that folks are getting assistance with. So moving on, we are going to talk about shelter. So every homeless services system has a shelter system. These are the things that people are most commonly know of when you're talking about homeless services are homeless shelters. Many larger communities or medium to large size communities have homeless shelters. So in our homeless services system, we have 2 shelter systems. And shelters exist in a couple of different ways. So we have what is called high barrier shelter, and we have what is called low barrier shelter. The way that you kind of define a high barrier shelter is there are some kind of requirements. So maybe program requirements that you have to participate in order to stay at the shelter. The other type of shelter is the low barrier shelter, and it sounds like what it is. So basically removing as many barriers as possible to help people get the shelter that they need night by night. So we have a couple we have one of each of those in our community. So first I'm going to talk about Boise Rescue Mission. And Boise Rescue Mission is pretty well known in our community. They do have 2 specific shelters because they separate their shelters, men and women. So the first shelter, the men's shelter, is called the River of Life. And that is the men's shelter. So they have a recovery program there. They also have a veterans program there. So this shelter system is really popular for people who are maybe re-entering from the prison system because they're trying to stay in their recovery and they're trying to stay grounded and trying to move forward in their lives. And only adult men can stay here. So I just point that out because we do have single fathers who come into our homeless system who do need services. And currently the River of Life is not equipped to work with single dads who also have children. However, they do have a women's shelter called City Light. And this is a shelter for women and children. Typically the age of children that can come to the shelter, if they are female, they can be any age. If they are male, typically they can go into that shelter up until about maybe age 12 or 13. Once they kind of start getting a bit bigger, then it's more difficult for City Light to house them. Another thing to note about the Boise Rescue Mission shelter system is that folks are required to participate in religious programming if they do want to stay longer than 17 days in that shelter. So that would be kind of one of the reasons why you might see people struggling to go into that shelter system. The second shelter system we have here in Ada County is going to be Interfaith Sanctuary. And Interfaith Sanctuary they have a main shelter location on River Street, and then they are also, due to COVID and the increase in the homeless population, they are also working out of the Red Lion where they are housing families and medically fragile adults. So they've got, they are able to see families that are intact, so meaning like a 2-parent family, whereas up here, family separation may occur because, dad might need to stay at River of Life, mom is staying with the kids at City Light. And kind of what research does tell us is that when folks are separated from their natural supports, that makes the traumatic event that they are experiencing that much more traumatic. And I mention that because I want our community to understand why it might be difficult for some of our families to stay in shelter and why Certain community reports might say there are available beds, but then you hear of families sleeping in their cars. One of those is because they don't want to have family separation. The great part about the Interfaith program is that you can have a two-parent family. You don't have to separate in order to stay with your family. The hard part about that is, though, right now, is that the Red Lion program has a wait list of about 70 families right now. So you've got 70 families who really have nowhere to go, who are trying to decide night by night where they need to stay. Interfaith Sanctuary also, as I mentioned, has the medically fragile adults in the Red Lion Hotel. And we work really hard with them to get these folks taken care of and get them what they need in regards to housing and additional shelter if they need that. Interfaith, in addition to these programs, they have been running a mental health program called Project Wellbeing, and then they also have a recovery program called Project Recovery. They have a very healthy partnership with Recovery for Life, now Trivium, services in order to provide services to folks who are in recovery. The next shelter system, so these shelters are what we call night shelters, so people can check in the evening and then they stay overnight, and then they have to when they wake up in the morning, they need to leave. So we also have what we call a day shelter in our homeless system. And that day shelter is called Corpus Christi. This is a place where folks can go during the day, get a light breakfast, snacks, a light lunch if they have enough donations to provide that, coffee. They can utilize phones, computers, showers, and get laundry done. So this is a really crucial part of the homeless services system because they're serving people who otherwise don't have anywhere to go during the day. So super important, small building. So we get as many people in there during the day as we can to keep them warm and safe. Now, in addition to these, there are a couple of shelters that work specifically with special populations. So the first one is going to be the WCA, Women and Children Alliance. So they operate a shelter system for folks who are fleeing a domestic violence situation. These shelters are very safe and highly secure, so to avoid any safety issues. One does need to be fleeing domestic violence, and if you're in that situation, all you need to do is call the WCA and be screened and placed on their waiting list. They can house, shelter 23 to 24 families within their shelter system. The last shelter system that I'm going to talk about is Hayes House. Hayes House is for youth. So Hayes House is run by the Idaho Youth Ranch. Sorry guys, my handwriting is struggling. So the Hayes House is operated by the Idaho Youth Ranch. The cool part about the Idaho Youth Ranch is once a kiddo goes into Hayes House, they're completely wrapped around in services such as equine therapy, counseling, community-based services, and everything that kiddo needs to maintain stability within their life. They even keep that kiddo in their extracurricular activities when they can, keep them at their home school, and really rally around that kiddo. Typically, they are seeing kids who are 12 to 13 and up to age 17 or through 17, which is great because as I was mentioning up here, we've got a little bit of an issue in terms of River of Life not really being able to accept children, and then City Light accepting male children only up to a certain age. Well, Hayes House can fill that gap. And so let's say you're a single mom with maybe a 14 or 15-year-old son. You can check into City Light, and then you can work with Hayes House to get your kiddo checked in there so that they have the supports that they need. As I mentioned earlier, it is very hard for our homeless families to separate from their natural support system. So it is a very difficult decision that people have to make when they decide to stay in our shelter system and separate in any ways. It's just really difficult for them. And I bring that up not to highlight, problems with the shelter system. I do that. I'm telling you guys about that so that you understand why there are families who feel like they don't want to stay in the shelter or can't stay in the shelter, even when we say, hey, there's room at the shelter, there's room at the shelter. You know, they're up against many kind of differing types of barriers when they're trying to figure out which system, you know, is safest for them and which system is going to help them and their whole family. So just to highlight that a little bit. Next, we're going to talk about outreach. Oops. So our homeless services system does have an outreach program. The typical kind of definition of an outreach program is folks who we mobilize to go out into the community to meet people where they are at. What's really cool is that our homeless service systems outreach team does work here out of Catch. So we have the outreach team going out on a daily basis to engage with folks in the community. So outreach's main responsibility is to engage folks who have historically not been engaged in the homeless services system, to see what types of resources we can get them to increase their stability and increase the chances that they might engage in a housing opportunity later on down the road. So we're engaging with folks in the outreach team. A lot of times we are working with people who have what we call a severe and persistent mental illness. And many times those folks with those severe and persistent mental illnesses are really not successful in the shelter system, and those are the folks that the outreach team is engaging with. So we have 3 staff members who specialize in people with severe and persistent mental illness through the outreach team, and then we have 2 other outreach workers who are kind of general outreach workers who help people with basic things that ultimately lead to housing or employment, such as helping folks secure phones, social security cards, IDs, all of those those things that we all have, like in a filing cabinet, right, in our house, or a safe or something. It's really difficult for our folks to keep track of those items, and they're super important, right? They lead to employment and housing. So if someone doesn't have those things, they're unable to move forward. So we provide that here. The other thing is that outreach has a very strong relationship with the Boise Police Department and is working to increase their connection with the other police departments here in Ada County. So they work really closely together to help find solutions for folks who are living, say, in cars and RVs, or people who keep kind of coming up as maybe being arrested, for various things being outside. We call them homeless tickets, things that people get that you and I wouldn't get because we have a place to live, such as going to the bathroom or drinking or something like that. Anyone in our community can actually send an email to outreach. If you see anyone in your community who's struggling, living in a vehicle, maybe you drive by a certain patch of grass every day and you kind of notice there's camping equipment there, you can certainly reach out to our outreach team via email, and they will work to engage with that person. What's really important to let them know is exactly where you saw that person, and hey, like if you've seen them there multiple days in a row, hey, I've seen this person the last 3 days, they're on the corner of this street and that street, they seem to be in an RV, it looks like it might be broken down, something like that, to give them some details so that they can locate these folks. Next, we're going to talk about Connect. That's me. So our Path Home Connect, we do kind of what our name implies, we connect. We do that in a few different ways. So one, we manage what we call the Housing Crisis Hotline. Oops. So the Housing Crisis Hotline is something that was started on July 1st of this year. And all of those calls come through Catch, as our Path Home Connect is managed by Catch. They took it on in 2017. So the Housing Crisis Hotline is a place that anyone experiencing any type of housing crisis or housing instability can contact and get connected to resources. As I kind of showed you over here, the prevention is a really good example. There's kind of 3 different big buckets, right? and you're kind of meeting certain requirements to fall into that bucket. Well, rather than have our clients who are panicked in crisis mode figure out which bucket they belong in, they can contact the Housing Crisis Hotline and we can help them determine what that bucket is. So the Housing Crisis Hotline phone number is 208-336-HOME or 208-336-4663. Anyone can call that number and get information. We've had tons of family members call us, hey, my aunt, my grandma, she's struggling. I'm really trying to help her right now. We have case managers give us a call. One really cool thing is, while this was created with our clients in mind who are going through a very difficult time right now, the other cool thing that the Housing Crisis Hotline has done is it has kind of relieved the pressure on other community service providers to know every single housing resource that's available. We let them be experts in what they do, which is typically kind of mental health case management. And then we're the experts in what we do, which is connecting folks to resources. The other thing that we can do here is send referrals directly to various partners so that clients don't have to call multiple places in order to get served. We can just do that for them and then they will get a call from that agency. The second thing that we do here at our Path Home Connect is a process that we call coordinated entry. What that means really is that we bring people in who are living on the streets, in a shelter, camping, in a place unfit for human habitation, or fleeing domestic violence. We bring them in and we ask them a series of questions for a couple of reasons. One, it helps us determine their level of vulnerability. So coordinated entry systems exist so that we can identify the most vulnerable members of our community and we make sure we're helping them first so that they are getting off the streets, out of the shelter as quickly as they can. So kind of referring back to these maybe medically fragile adults or families, who tend to have higher vulnerabilities. They're going to come to the top of the list and they're going to be getting served through various housing programs, which we'll talk about in a moment. The other really important thing about coordinated entry and these housing assessments that we do is it really helps us dig into what someone's housing barriers are. Since I've been here, we have really kind of four main housing barriers that a lot of people experience. So one of them is going to be credit. The next one is going to be criminal background. Third is going to be past evictions. And then fourth is going to be money owed either to a past landlord or to past due utilities. So those are kind of the four main barriers that we see. A lot of people have more than one of those. If they have one barrier, they typically maybe have another. So like if you have not paid your utility bill, you're also going to be suffering from poor credit. So those are kind of compounding vulnerabilities are things that we talk about in these sessions with our clients so that we can help them solve their housing crisis as quickly as possible. When I go over the housing programs in a moment, you'll see why that's so important because we have many more people in our system, in our homeless services system, than we have resources to provide. And so we do have other solutions for them that we kind of find out through the process of doing this housing assessment. Really what it is it's a problem-solving session. It's a way for us to sit down with people, help them dig into what's going on, and help them understand how they can overcome those barriers and get housed again as quickly as possible. The third thing, partners. So we here at Catch understand how important it is to work collaboratively with our partners. And so one of the other functions of our Path Home Connect is just to keep that partner network very healthy, keep it strong. We have meetings every other week with many of our partners so that we can talk about various things going on in the homeless system, so that we can talk about specific clients who might be struggling to locate housing because some other partners who are attending this meeting might have a lead, right? They might know someone who just moved out of a place and they might know that there's an opening at such and such house, that sort of thing. So we keep that partner network really strong and robust. We also send out a lot of emails to help everyone stay educated and up to date on various things that are going on in our homeless system. On my level as the program director, typically with the partners, I'm working more on a service provider level. So I'm working with service providers and clients. And then our partner, our lead partners at the city for the Continuum of Care, they're going to be working like with the leadership of those organizations so that we can create strategic solutions for addressing our homeless crisis. I'm going to do some goofy drawing here so I can make enough room. Okay, so next we're going to talk about housing programs. So one of the housing programs I think that a lot of people know about because it's a nationwide program is called Section 8. Now, Section 8 is a voucher-based program where people pay a certain percentage of their income toward their rent. And this is a program that is meant to serve people in poverty. By and large, our clients do live in poverty, but the Section 8 program helps people across a wide, array of situations, and they don't specialize in homelessness, although they do have preferences for people who are experiencing homelessness in some cases. What I'm going to be talking about today are housing programs that specifically serve our population of folks experiencing homelessness, meaning people who are living on the street, in a shelter, in a car, camping, place unfit for human habitation, or fleeing a domestic violence situation. So I'm really going to talk about kind of these specialty programs that are specifically serving our most vulnerable community members. So the first program I want to talk to you about, I'm going to pause actually and get a drink of water. I get very excited about talking about this stuff, and so I get all dried up. Okay, so talking about housing programs. So the first housing program we're going to talk about is called Rapid Rehousing. And there's one program like that here in Ada County, and it's called Taking Root. And this is through Catch. So rapid rehousing is the term that is given to this housing intervention by the Department of Housing and Urban Development, HUD. So it's like our official term. However, it's not super rapid, especially right now during the housing crisis and through our growing homeless population. So right now, folks can be living in homelessness for up to 2 years before they get to the top of this list. And what that list looks like right now is we have almost 300 families. And these are all families with children. We have about 300 families with children who are all waiting for this program to have an opening for them to get assistance. So that is why, again, I'm going to reference our housing assessment, because there are other ways to resolve a housing crisis without having to wait on a super long list. One of those, we call it rapid resolution. Rapid resolution really looks like first month's rent and deposit. So we can help get people in. Sometimes it can cost, up to $3,000 to get moved in, because you have to pay a deposit, and maybe if your credit's not great, maybe you have to pay a double deposit, and then you pay that first month's rent. So anybody who we see who has a sustainable income, or they get a sustainable income at any time while they're experiencing homelessness, we can get them set up with a first month's rent and deposit. Now, there are 3 programs that help with first month's rent and deposit, and you're going to hear me repeat some names. So one is Jesse Tree. So they're able to help individuals who maybe are living in a hotel or staying on a couch with security deposit assistance. The second one is going to be Navigation. I'm going to reference them again. So navigation, again, they can do anything that has to do with the safety of a child. And if you are living in a shelter or if you're even staying on a couch, they're able to help with first month's rent deposit for people who have children under the age of 18. Third, we affectionately call the Linda Fund. And Linda Fund lives actually at our Path Home Connect. So we have a housing navigator who also manages first month's rent and deposit assistance. So what she will do is she'll do a housing consultation with a client, figure out what their income is, where they want to live, what they're looking for, and then assist them in finding that, and then helping with that first month's rent and deposit to get them in. So we really love this intervention because it is fast. And as soon as you can get a sustainable income, we can assist you in getting into a place, and we love using this. Through a generous donation from the city of Boise, one thing that has been really cool is that we've been able to be really flexible with some of the housing solutions that we have. As the market gets tighter and tighter, we have to think outside the box. We have to get a little bit creative. And unfortunately, sometimes the federal funding does not catch up to what we're doing as quickly as we need it to. So it's really important for us to have flexible funding. A lot of times comes from private donors or places like the city of Boise that has a lot fewer restrictions on it. So we can do things like help people get into a group home or assisted living facility, help folks rent a room in a place, and potentially even safe and sober housing, getting people in there. So that has been a huge benefit to our community because it's helped us house so many people that we wouldn't be able to house if we only had access to our federal funding. The next housing program I'm going to talk to you about, we call it permanent supportive housing. Permanent supportive housing. But really quick, I'm going to go back because I totally forgot to talk to you guys about what rapid rehousing is and what it does. So when we bring folks into the rapid rehousing program or the Taking Root program, we're really scooping them up and we're getting them into housing as quickly as we can. We do follow a housing first philosophy because we understand that there's no way we can expect someone to work on the other things of their life if their basic needs are not met. We cannot expect someone to work on all of those traumas and all of that crisis that's gone on in their life that has led up to homelessness until they get back into a place where they are safe, because their brain is just lit up right now with crisis and fear and anxiety, and it's really hard to focus on self-improvement when your brain is going through that. So what Catch does and what Taking Root does is we get folks into an apartment as quickly as we can, or a unit, and then work on paying their rent and application fees while they're working on their long-term stability. The hope is, or the expectation really, is that at the end of the Taking Root program, once you graduate, you are taking over everything. You've gotten restabilized, and you're paying all of your own rent, your utilities, everything that you need. Taking Root does what we call progressive engagement model. So what that means is you get exactly what you need, no more, no less. What that looks like in reality is, let's say someone comes into the Taking Root program and they're making enough income to pay $300 a month $300 of rent per month. So what the Taking Root team will do is say, okay, you pay $300 and then we'll pay the other $700. And then next month when you get that new job, then you're going to pay $400 and we're going to pay $600. So it really helps people get to a place where they really can take things over. If you're paying 100% of someone's rent for the entire time they're in the program and then you quickly cut it off, it can be very jarring, and people just struggle to succeed like that. So what we do is we just take it really slow and we taper them off as they regain that stability and that sustainability. Okay, there was one more thing. I might come back to this. I totally forgot. Okay. So permanent supportive housing is a supportive housing program that kind of does what it says, right? It's permanent, and there's two programs here in Ada County that we do. So one is through a voucher, that we use out in the community. So voucher. This is provided to us through the Boise City Ada County Housing Authority. And what the Housing Authority has recognized is that there are some people who need a little bit more help staying housed. So what that might look like is a case manager. So the Housing Authority provides a voucher, which is subsidized rent, because most of the folks that are going to be coming through this program are on a disability income, so they're on that fixed income. On average, typically it's about $800 a month. So they're working with that voucher. But then what's really cool is the whole time that they have this voucher, they have a case manager whose sole job is to help keep them housed and stable. So what that looks like in practice is maybe someone with memory issues. Maybe the case manager just needs to help them come up with a way to pay their rent on time every month because they forget. Other things that might look like is maybe helping a tenant navigate a conversation with a landlord because maybe they got a lease violation for having too many people over or something like that. The case manager can help navigate that conversation because for our clients, that can be a really intimidating process. And most of the time, landlords just want to be communicated with. And when people go quiet, the landlords kind of start to get nervous and are maybe a little less forgiving or less gracious because they don't know what's going on and they need to protect their property. It's very understandable. So this is an incredibly cool program. And the case management is provided by one of our partners, Terry Riley Health Services. And they're kind of the lead provider in our community and really in the Treasure Valley for serving people experiencing homelessness. So they are very well versed in working with this population and they do a wonderful job. The other organization that is contracted to assist with case management for this voucher program is LADA, Community Action. And they also work with people living in poverty and people experiencing homelessness really frequently. And so they are also very amazing. The second program I want to talk to you guys about, second permanent supportive housing program, is going to be New Path. So I don't know why, but here in our homeless services system, we like to use the word path a lot, and I know it can be really confusing. People will call us and think they're calling New Path. People will call New Path, think they're calling Our Path Home. No big deal. We're really used to it. So call anywhere, and we'll get you where you need to go. So New Path is Idaho's very first housing project. So what we do is we work with folks over at New Path who have been living in homelessness an incredibly long time. So one of the people over there has lived in homelessness 30 years before he got housed. So just as an example. Secondly, the folks at New Path all have some sort of disabling condition that makes them highly vulnerable. And then third, historically, people who are experiencing homelessness tend to have to utilize a lot of emergency services to get their needs met. Part of this is because they're exposed to the elements and they really are struggling. Their health is struggling. As I mentioned, a lot of them have a disabling condition that they're also kind of trying to manage while they're, say, living on the street, living in their car, living in the shelter. So it can be really difficult. So what that looks like is a lot of maybe emergency room visits. And then also having a lot of run-ins with criminal justice system. So what we call those are frequent users, utilizers of the emergency system. And so also the people at New Path have historically been high utilizers of that emergency system. Because what we wanted to do is show our community how important housing really is. Because as soon as people move into New Path, or as soon as people get housed, really, their utilization of those emergency services goes way down. So to the degree that New Path over the last 2 years, so since it has opened, has saved our community, our local community, $2.6 million. So this is a really impressive number that we use, or that we found through our research, but we use that to educate the community that Housing First really does work. What was the other thing I wanted to say? New Path is a voucher as well that is also provided by the Housing Authority. However, that voucher is attached to the apartment complex rather than this voucher where you can go out anywhere in town and find a place that accepts the voucher. The difficulty right now for our community is that not a lot of places are accepting the vouchers because rents have outpaced what the federal government will give us to manage these vouchers. So it's very challenging for our clients to find housing. That's another function of this case manager here in the permanent supportive housing piece, because they also help our clients locate housing. They help our clients advocate for themselves, or they help advocate on behalf of our clients to get them into housing. So yes, that is, I was just thinking if there's anything else I want to share with you guys. New Path is an amazing project, and it really is proof that Housing First works. We don't see, housing or lack of housing as a failure of moral character. We see it as someone who has experienced so much trauma that their body has just shut down, and we need to help them get back onto a path of stability and sustainability. So that really concludes my presentation today on our continuum of care here in Ada County. As you know, we're doing this, as I said before, Catch is so invested in educating our community in what we do here and how we manage and how we kind of navigate this system. And we felt like the Avenues for Hope campaign has been a really great catalyst to help us get a lot of word out there to y'all. So if anyone does have any questions, we will work on answering those right now.
Thank you so much, Sara. Our first question is, in your perspective, what are some gaps in the continuum of care?
So I would say gaps that are in the continuum of care by and large are that none of these services has enough resources to help everyone who is in need at this moment. Oh, that just made me remember. I forgot to share with you guys how many folks are waiting for these permanent supportive housing interventions. So right now we have almost 500 households on the wait list for that. So as you can see right now, I mean, we've almost got 800 folks or 800 households. This actually comes out to be about 1,500 people, human beings, who are struggling and waiting for some type of intervention. Let me see, other gaps. It's really just the need is outpacing the resource at this time, and we're not able to assist. The other really big gap is inventory, housing inventory. What we're seeing is a growing homeless population and not a lot of places for them to leave my system. So when they come into my system, it's very challenging to get them out. That's why it's so important for places like our prevention providers to be able to intervene before someone loses their housing, because once they lose that housing, it's so difficult to find something new that meets those requirements of being like affordable and able for our clients to sustain.
Thank you, Sara. And our next question is, what are some misconceptions people have about folks experiencing homelessness?
So one, I kind of mentioned it here with New Path and Housing First, is that homelessness is a result of someone's fault. They got themselves there. It's through their own actions that led to homelessness, that we only deserve housing if we're an upstanding moral citizen. And what I find that unites every single person that comes into my office is some of the most intense trauma, lifetime of trauma that I've ever heard in my life. And this really, if I had to say there was one thing that united everyone that comes through our doors, it would be trauma. The other really big misconception that I hear a lot is addiction. So we do have, it's true, right? We have a lot of people in the homeless community who have an addiction. Many times though, the addiction did not precede the homelessness. The addiction came after. When someone was living on the street, cold or hot, they've lost everything and they have nowhere else to turn, and they're just trying to numb the pain. So that's another one. And I had a third one, but I can't remember what it is right now.
It's all good. And our next question comes from Sue. And Sue is asking, anything on the horizon for young adults? I'm concerned about the new 18-year-olds I work with who really do not do well in interfaith.
Yeah, hi Sue. Thank you for your question. So we are really working hard to really get some healthy partnerships for youth. We already have Hayes House and Idaho Youth Ranch, although those are younger kids. And really what we want to do is work with folks who are like aging out of foster care, because it's a huge population where our youth comes from. So what we're looking at right now is developing healthier and more robust partnerships with folks who serve youth, and so that we can really tap into that. Beyond that, I am unsure of what we have available for youth at this time.
Thank you, Sara. And our last question is, how can folks get involved? What are ways that people can make an impact in ending homelessness here in Ada County?
So one is being here today and being educated on our continuum of care. It's super helpful. Pass this along to friends, family members, educate others in any way that you can. We also really, really need advocates for homelessness to attend their neighborhood meetings, because oppositional neighbors tend to be very loud, and we need people who are advocates to be loud as well. And really all of these organizations really rely on volunteers. They rely on donations, both cash and items. You really can visit the Avenues for Hope website and see everyone who is participating right now is a partner in homelessness or housing insecurity, and go through and see really who piques your interest, what organizations have a mission that you believe in, and reach out to them and see what they need. Is really kind of one of the biggest things. So education, awareness, participate in your community, and reach out, volunteer, provide funding, any of those things.
Thank you so much, Sara. And lastly, is there anything else that you want to share?
No, I just want to say thank you all for being here today. You can always reach out to us. Any of you that are watching today can reach out to any of these resources to learn more, or visit the Avenues for Hope website, and you can kind of get a blurb on each of the organizations that we work with. Thank you so much.